I think the one thing as well that people think signing, dating and witnessing a will is straightforward. As part of our service, we offer, we insist that all clients send their documents back so we can check them, verify them and make sure that they've got a valid will in place for when that document needs to be used. The amount of times that we see dating wrong, the amount of times that we see witnesses being used that are benefiting from the will, or witnesses that are family members or anything like that. I mean, the errors that we see.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was just sort of thinking as you said that, I think our profits wouldn't be much dissimilar if we said you can pay for your will up front and if you get it wrong, we'll change it, or we'll give you a will for free and if you get it wrong, you've got to pay for it. Because the reality is most people get it wrong at some point. So I don't think we'd be in a much different situation if we gave everybody a free will but said they have to pay as if they did it wrong. Because the reality is people just don't understand how to sign, witness and obviously execute legal documentation. And if it's not done properly, it's not done.
Yeah, I mean, I think just talking about signing, dating, order of signing, lasting power of attorneys. I mean, for me, that is... Of course, you can do lasting powers of attorney yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. And that's something that's common knowledge. You can do it through the Office of the Public Guardian, and you can do it yourself. The error rate that we see when we colour code signing, we do full instruction sheets. They're 15-page documents.
Yeah.
There's 2 lasting power of attorneys.
Yeah.
Why do people get them so wrong? Or why do people think they can do them themselves?
Well, I don't know why people think they can do them themselves, because they are a sort of highly complex legal document with huge ramifications for attorneys if done incorrectly. Take it from Martin Lewis. He encourages you to go and pay a professional to do it. Now, that's the consumer champion who spent his entire career trying to get people to do things as cheap as possible for free to save them money, and even he's turning around and saying go and pay a legal professional to do your power of attorney. It's a long process, it's extremely complicated, and it's not something you can make mistakes on. So if somebody who's made a living out of giving things away for free is telling you to go and pay someone to do it, I think it's a fair assumption it's not a 5-minute job.
And it's more the number of signatures that you've got to do. The order of signing is a key one.
Yeah.
The dating of the lasting power of attorney, but also understanding what that lasting power of attorney is actually doing, what power it's giving.
Yeah.
Some people love lasting power of attorneys, some people don't.
Yeah.
In your opinion, where do you stand with lasting power of attorneys?
I think I've said before, they're more important than wills, based on the fact of there's no second chance if you haven't got power of attorney. And what happens to people in a time of extreme distress. Unfortunately, we all lose people, and the reality is most people in life have gone through the loss of a parent, a sibling, a child. That is part of life, but there's nothing that can plan you for going through the loss of capacity as a loved one, such as a stroke, a heart attack, a road traffic accident, dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, all these things that can go wrong. And you've got a family that have been dealt a huge blow of a loved one not being able to be themselves any longer. And then you've got the authorities telling that family where you're going to live, what treatment you're going to get, what bills are going to get paid. I mean, we've had stories where bailiffs have turned up at the door for unpaid bills whilst the person's in care. Now, again, what do you think happens? The bank says, don't worry, you don't need to pay your mortgage anymore because you're not very well. Or the council tax doesn't need paying, the gas and electric doesn't need paying. Can you imagine you've got a loved one lying in a hospital bed and your gas and electric's cut off because you haven't paid your bill? I mean, it's just absolutely harrowing. And a power of attorney just takes all of that away. You can deal with anything relating to that person's finances or health, as long as permission has been granted. When that person loses mental capacity, that is invaluable. And capacity may not be lost for 5-10 minutes. Capacity may be lost for 5 to 10 years. Where is the end in sight when somebody isn't dying? They're just mentally incapable.
I think there's an association as well that they're for old people.
Yeah, absolutely not. No, yeah, they're for anyone from the age of 18 to 80 and anything over that.
Because I think people forget about the fact that you could have an accident and end up in a coma, short term, long term, And that's not an age. I think people associate Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia, but there's younger people that are getting diagnosed now.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you were talking, there was that sports star that's just been diagnosed.
Yeah, Dean Windass, sadly, a footballer, really popular because of his character, larger than life personality, been on the TV all his life in some capacity, dementia in his mid-40s. And again, it's diagnosed now. I think 50 years ago, it was down to old age or a bit of forgetfulness, but actually it's something that is diagnosed and people are a lot more aware of now.
And I think the institutions as well. So you're talking about healthcare and you're talking about financial institutions. They are getting, and quite rightly so, more protective over your data, your
Absolutely.
personal data.
Yeah.
Therefore, if you haven't got a lasting power of attorney, you can't expect husband, wife, partner, son, daughter to be able to go into the bank and say, my mum, my father's lost mental capacity. I demand that you tell me X, Y, and Z about your bank account. It doesn't happen, does it?
No, not at all. I mean, even between husband and wife, you find 5 subscriptions that's in your husband's or wife's name, ring all 5 and see if you get through to one of them. You will not be able to speak to them. And it doesn't matter whether you know their inside leg measurement, whether you've been with them since you were 18 and you're school sweethearts. If you've not got power of attorney and that person can't give you consent to speak on their behalf, you will not be able to deal with that. Now, that could be something as trivial as the Sky subscription. That could be something as serious as a mortgage payment. And again, what are you going to do if you're in a situation where you've got a huge financial commitment like a mortgage, often joint if you're married? Remortgages come up, interest rates have dropped today, but you can't remortgage because your spouse is incapacitated. Unfortunately, no reduced interest rate for you. You're on the standard variable rate at whatever rate it is till that person comes around or dies. I mean, it's heartbreaking for one to go through, and why you would want to put a loved one through that. It just, anybody who says they're too young for a power of attorney must be under 18, because that's the only time that phrase is allowed to be said in my eyes. If you're 18 years today, you should be doing a power of attorney today.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen the industry change in terms of, like, years ago, the institution used to be able to take like copies of documents. I mean, the amount now they're wanting the original lasting power of attorney document, because obviously protection for personal data has gone up, which, look, we all want.
Yeah.
You can't say on one side that we want our data protected and then on the other side, oh, just give it to anybody. But these documents are put in place so you're choosing somebody that you trust that's not going to abuse your personal circumstances. You're choosing people that you trust to step into your shoes to make those decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, most of us want things until it goes against us, and that's like anything in life.
Yeah.
If you're dealing with something that is now an inconvenience to you, you wish the rules weren't the way they were. But if your bank's rang you just to say they've protected you from fraud because of X, Y, and Z, you think those rules are the best thing since sliced bread, and that is life essentially. And we are in a society now where most people have a huge digital footprint through their banking, through their social media, through all those things that ultimately, a lot at the moment, that something goes astray. And banking's a real unique one, because I think most people say, don't worry, my daughter knows my PIN code so she can go down to the cash point. One should be not allowed to do that, because if you've lost capacity, she's got no consent to do that. But also, you can't go into a bank and take out hardly any money now without identity checks. And I'm pretty certain if you took out large sums of cash day after day, the bank would put a block on it because they'll think something's wrong. So that lasts for a week, 2 weeks, and then you've got to unlock the account. You're not going to be able to do it. We live in a society now where everything is so secure that if you've not got power of attorney and you lose capacity, your family are completely locked out.
Yeah. We haven't really covered when somebody passes away, what happens in terms of a process, and what's probate?
So probate is the administration of a deceased estate, essentially. So typically, if the estate's over £5,000, a grant of probate will be needed. The common misconception is a will avoids that. It doesn't. A will makes probate much easier. If you've not got a will, probate can be years of sort of pain, sort of heartache, and family arguing over who's doing what, essentially. If you've got a will, Probate is the administration of what you've put in your will. So for the purpose of, let's assume a client's done a will, what will happen next is the executor that the client's appointed will have to apply for that grant of probate.
Yeah.
Now, that grant of probate is issued by the probate office, that's a government office, and that will therefore enable the executor to enact the wishes of the will. Now, the executor's got a really important job, because it's the executor's job to not only make sure that the will is obviously adhered to, but also the client has sort of settled any debts, liabilities, taxes, and it's the executor that's responsible for it all, essentially. So when people talk about, I'll get my mate down the pub to do it, that's a huge responsibility to put on someone. The executor's job is fill in accounts for HMRC, pay any outstanding liabilities, allow the estate to sort of face a form of claim. Now, you've got 6 months from grant of probate for a claim to be made against the estate, so executor would have to deal with all of that. But then obviously sell property, close accounts, get share statements of dividends, all those sort of things, and make sure the beneficiaries get what their share is. The thing is, with an executor, they are legally and financially responsible for their actions. I may have told the story before of executors being made bankrupt because of maladministration, and typically what that is no understanding of what their role is, giving everybody the money, usually not paying HMRC or a debt, a mortgage provider, whatever that may be, and that person come knocking on the executor's door and they haven't got the funds to pay it, essentially. So probate is the entire administration of a deceased estate. But the key to probate is you've got a will and you've got a responsible executor that knows what they're doing and obviously what's involved.
And that executor can be a family member.
Yeah.
It can be a friend, and it can be a professional.
Yeah.
I guess what I want to say to everybody that's listening today is, even if clients don't appoint a professional executor through Kingswood, even when somebody passes away, we're always there to assist them, and we'll assist them in terms of being able to do it themselves or the executor. So we will help them through that process so they're not left alone, because it can be a bit of a minefield.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with Kingswood, if you write your will with us, you get access to our free bereavement service, which is key. I mean, again, you write a will for £20 online and think they're going to care what happens when you die. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
That's why you come to an estate planner who can talk you through that process, because you go and see a high street solicitor, you'll pay an arm and a leg just for them to tell you what to do, never mind actually do anything for you. And that's where our service is so key. It's that holding hand from start to finish. We've helped you make the will. Now we're going to help your executor administer it.
I mean, I had a scenario with a client, and he was living with his mum and dad, and he was paying all the mortgage and has been done for years.
Yeah.
His mum and dad's passed away. He assumed, because he was paying the mortgage, that the property was left to him.
Yeah.
They didn't have a will. He's one of 5. He speaks to 4 of them, or 3 of them.
Yeah.
And he doesn't speak to 1 of them.
Yeah.
Therefore, without a will, it now gets split 5 ways.
Yeah.
He's now got a bit of an issue on his hands, and he's got 1 of them saying, no, it's not yours.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't understand as well why people put probate off, but I guess it's lack of understanding.
Yeah, and I think it's almost it's that finality of it, because once probate's done, that person's affairs are done. Now, it's key to note, if you've got tax concerns, HMRC charge interest from 6 months of date of death. So putting off probate is only putting up tax bills, because the reality is it's the responsibility of the estate to settle any taxes and debts. If they're not done, then ultimately that interest could obviously take away the whole estate.
But again, choosing a firm like ourselves, we're always there for the family members. When anything does happen, we can give advice in terms of the next steps, what they need to be doing, and helping them through a difficult situation.
Yeah, and we can tell them what to do and how to do it, and then they can choose whether it's something they want to do or not. They may turn around and say, I don't like the sound of any of that, can you do it for me? And that's fine. We'll obviously give a quotation of what that would cost. They may turn around and say, thank goodness you told us, we'll go and get that sorted, you've been a lifesaver. And that is the beauty of our service. There's sort of that holding the hand, there's no pressure. It's not every time you pick up the phone, it's another bill. It's about having a relationship that ensures it makes life as simple as possible at an already difficult time.
So if anybody's watching, listening, and thinking, right, I do need to get a will in place, or I do need to start my estate planning journey, how do you bring that conversation up with a partner, husband, wife? How do you bring this conversation up?
I think sometimes it's talking about what you would know that person wouldn't want to happen. So I'm pretty confident if I said to my wife, we haven't got a will, you died yesterday, and tomorrow I met somebody else, it's all going to go to her, that would give her the motivation to write a will. I'm pretty certain if you've got young children and there's a parent you wouldn't want sort of managing their money, that's going to be the sort of trigger point. So I guess sometimes it's being cruel to be kind in the sense of letting somebody know what worst case looks like so they can do something about it. Because if you wouldn't like it to happen whilst you're here, times it by 10 when you're not here, essentially. And that is sometimes not an easy thing to do, but making a will is about being selfless. It's not about being selfish. So what you've got to make sure you do is make that person understand what it actually means for them if they don't have a will in place. Now, just saying it's time and effort for people probably isn't going to hit the spot, but knowing that all of your assets could go to a new partner, to stepchildren, to another family, to this local government for the cost of care, all those things, that is probably going to motivate somebody that's maybe on the fence.
I think as well, though, we're not expecting partners to have had this conversation prior to the consultation they'll have with us.
No.
The advisor will go through the different scenarios, different options that are available, and different scenarios that we've seen that could play out.
Yeah.
Therefore, it kind of sparks something and a conversation with them to then go, right, we want option A, we want option B, or whatever. So I guess for anybody that's listening to this, it's have the initial conversation about booking a consultation in. Let us do the rest.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let us tell you why you need a will. You just need to pick up the phone. Now, I'm very confident nobody's going to pick up the phone and tell me why they don't need a will.
Yeah.
Even if they're on their own with no family, I can still tell you why you need a will. And that is why it's so important you make that first step, essentially.
Do people need, so say for example, I write my will yesterday, should I be telling family members what's in that will?
No, it's personal. Some do and some don't.
Yeah.
Again, it's each to their own. There's no right or wrong. I'm really open about most things with my family in terms of who's getting what, because I don't want the arguments between them when I'm gone. But I appreciate not every family is like that, and there's nothing wrong with that. Whether you tell your family or not what's in your will, it's not going to change what happens when you go. The most important thing is they know you've made one, because the amount of families that don't even know mum or dad did a will and it comes as a big surprise, and that's obviously where things can go wrong. Or somebody thinks they've done a will 20 years ago and finds out there's a new will done 6 months before you died. So I think not saying what's in your will is fine, but making sure family know you've done it is really important.
Yeah, I would say that. I think people definitely need to know that you've got a will in place, because it's then they respect what you've put in your will. I think there's fors and against of telling them and setting out the expectation of what the mechanics of the will is.
Yeah.
But I guess what you're saying is it's not a necessity, it's personal choice.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. What absolutely needs to be covered within a will?
So there's some things that have to be included in the will. Goes without saying, obviously, your sort of basic sort of name, address, date of birth, so it identifies it's your will, not just sort of John Smith. But then your executors is a key thing. Who's going to administer the estate for you when you pass away, whether it's a friend, a family member, a professional. Who you want to benefit from your will, what shares do you want them to benefit from. Do you want to put gifts in your will? My gold ring goes to this person, my American sports car goes to that person. You can dictate all of that. Who you don't want to benefit from your estate. I mean, it's obviously not something everybody thinks about, but a lot of people are motivated by not who they do want to benefit, but who they don't want to benefit. You can
exclusions.
Yeah, you can put that in your will for sure. But funeral requests. Does everybody really know if their mum and dad wants to be buried, wants to be cremated? Do they know if they want to be an organ donor? These are all questions that can create real arguments. I've sat there and seen children fight over a Christmas tree. So if a child would fight over a Christmas tree, they would fight over pretty much anything. Let your kids know what you want and take the if, buts and maybes away.
Okay. And then in terms of, we briefly touched on executors. How many executors do you need for a will?
So it can be anything from sort of 1 to 4 is typically best advice. You don't want too many chefs in a kitchen, but at the same time, you don't want to just leave it all on one person's doorstep because it can be a daunting task. General advice would probably be 2 to 4 would be my best guess.
But if there's people out there thinking, oh, I don't know 2 people that I would trust, that's where professional executiveship comes in.
Absolutely, yeah. And if there isn't 2 people you can trust, you're a lot more vulnerable, because the reality is, if you can't think of 2 people to trust, how on earth is anybody going to sort it out for you when you're gone?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to mention, just in case people are kind of thinking about it, if people want to make charity donations within a will,
yeah,
we can include that.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
We do that quite a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for lots of different reasons. And just obviously understanding where things can pass. A lot of people say, well, I'm married with 2 kids, so I don't need a will. But if something happened to all of you together on holiday, a family disaster, a natural disaster, then what happens? You can state all those things in your will. So my will sort of goes down to the sort of 4th line of beneficiary, that if I'm not here, my wife's not here, my parents aren't here, my siblings aren't here, it goes on and on. Now, I've probably gone a bit too far, but I'm a cautious person. A lot of people don't go far enough and just say it goes left, right, up, down, and that's it. Well, that may not be what the world looks like 20 years from now.
Okay. Now, we also come across lots of clients that have multiple properties.
Yeah.
And there's lots of misconception around what people want to do with properties. What do you think the most common misconception is around people that have got a residential property and then either a commercial property or rental properties? What do you normally come across?
Yeah, so there's a mixture of things. So obviously the latest thing is a lot of people are putting their properties in limited companies. Now, that's got great tax benefits during your lifetime, but it makes no difference when you die. And a lot of people think, well, it's in a limited company, so I pay no tax. That's not the case. You're going to need to do some estate planning. A lot of people think, I've got 3 properties, 3 kids, so I'll gift each of them 1 property.
Yeah.
Your estate might not be able to afford that from an inheritance tax point of view. The chances are, if you've got 3 properties, you've probably got tax concerns. And if you haven't got the cash to settle that tax, then those 3 properties might become 1 or 2 as they need to be sold to pay the tax. Well, what happens then? The 2 kids get a property and 1 gets nothing. The reality is you need to think it through and talk to a specialist so we can best advise you.
And that's why we go through a fact-finding process to understand, A, what the clients want to achieve, and B, what their estate is made up. And then we give them the options. And ultimately, it's down for the client to make those decisions on what option's best for them.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, get in touch with us and we'll send you a free recommendation report detailed to your individual circumstances about what you need, why you need it, and what it's going to cost to do.
Okay. And in terms of properties, we've kind of touched on inheritance tax. There is so much misconception around people and inheritance tax. I think if you were to ask 10 clients, 9 of them would think that they've got inheritance tax due.
Yeah.
Please advise me of the limits. What is the inheritance tax limits currently?
Well, this is the thing with inheritance tax. They're all different based on your circumstances.
Okay.
So there are currently potentially 4 different rates of inheritance tax. Now, if you was to say to 4 different employees all sat in the same office doing the same job, you're going to pay different tax just based on whether you're married or you've got children, there would be anarchy. However, with inheritance tax, whether you're married or not has a huge bearing on what tax you pay. Whether you own your own property or not has a huge bearing on what tax you'll pay. And whether or not you've got kids or not will have a huge bearing on what tax you pay. Now, I'm married, I don't have kids. You're married and you don't have kids. But we're both going to have different rates of tax when we die. Why? Because you've got stepkids and I haven't. So just based on the fact you've got stepkids, you would get an allowance more than I get. Now, to give you a breakdown of what those rates could be, for a single person, something as little as 325,000. For a married couple, could be 650,000. When property and kids are involved, those limits increase to 500,000 and $1 million respectively. But then when you get to 2 million, it starts getting took off you. So The reality is, inheritance tax is a very complex tax that you need to speak to a specialist about. And just thinking, well, my mum didn't pay tax, so I won't pay tax, or next door doesn't pay it, so I'm not going to, is simply foolish planning.
We've briefly mentioned about a recommendation report. What is a recommendation report?
So a recommendation report is a 8 to 12 page document that is tailor-made to you and your family's circumstances, explaining everything you should consider. That includes your inheritance tax position, what lifetime planning solutions are available to you, what death planning solutions are available to you, and most importantly, giving you a bullet-pointed breakdown of what could and would happen without planning and what could and would happen with the right planning in place. So it's a detailed breakdown of what you need to do to put your affairs in order.
Absolutely. And how much do we charge for it?
We don't charge. Yeah, recommendation reports free of charge. We will give you a recommendation on what we think you should do, and then that's up to you whether you move forward with that or not.
And there may be multiple options. It might not just be as kind of black and white that there's option A or B.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, some people may like some things we recommend and not other things we recommend. And that's absolutely fine. Certainly doing half of what we say is better than doing nothing. So if anything we've spoken about today is relatable, made you think maybe it's time I stop putting it off, get in touch and let's have a conversation about it. My name's Daniel Axelrod. I'm the estate planning manager here at Kingswood. I will personally deal with you, not pass you on to somebody else that may not obviously understand what you're wanting to achieve. Get in touch, message me, call me, DM, whatever's easiest for you, and I assure you I will pick up the phone and put your mind at ease and put a name to that face. Speak to you soon.